Hello my friends and very welcome to my channel. This is Amen from Bookers, and now let's go for another part of Gulliver's Travels. Part 3, Lilliput at War. The island of Blefusca is only about a kilometer to the north of Lilliput. I knew that just beyond the narrow sea separating the two countries, there were at least 50 warships ready to attack us, with many other smaller ships, but I kept away from that side of the coast, so that the people of Blefusca wouldn't see me. I had a secret plan. From the king's workmen, I ordered 50 heavy metal hooks, each fastened to a piece of strong rope. I took off my coat and shoes and walked into the sea with the hooks and ropes in my hands. The water was deep in the middle, so I had to swim for a few meters, but it only took me half an hour to get to Blefusca. When the Blefuscans saw me, they were so frightened that they jumped out of their ships and swam to the beach. I then used one hook for each ship and tied all the ropes together at one end. While I was doing this, the enemy shot thousands of arrows at me, which caused me a lot of pain, and I was afraid of getting an arrow in my eyes, but I suddenly remembered I still had an old pair of reading glasses in my pocket. So I put them on and continued my work. When I was ready, I started walking into the shallow water away from Blefusca. As I walked through the waves, I pulled the enemy's warships behind me. When the people of Blefusca realized that all their warships were disappearing, their cries were terrible to hear. As I came nearer to Lilliput, I saw the king and all his lords and ladies standing at the beach. They could only see Blefusca's warships coming closer. As I was swimming and my head was occasionally under the water, therefore they supposed that I had drowned and that the Blefuscan ships were attacking. But when they saw me walking out of the sea, they welcomed me warmly with cries of astonishment and delight. The king himself came down to the water to meet me. "Everyone in Lilliput is grateful to you," he cried, "for your bravery. You will be one of my lords from now on." "Thank you, sir," I replied. "And now," he continued, "go back and steal all the enemy's ships, so that we can defeat Blefusca forever. We will destroy the big Indians, and I will become king of the whole world." "But I should not agree to this plan, sir," I replied. "I will never help you to take a brave nation's freedom away. Lilliput and Blefusca should live in peace now." The king couldn't persuade me, and unfortunately he never forgot that I had refused to do what he wanted. Although I had saved his country from attack by Blefuscan warships, he preferred to remember my refusal. From this time on, I heard from my friends that there were secret conversations in the palace between the king and some of his lords, who were jealous of me. These conversations nearly led to my death in the end. About 3 weeks later, the king of Blefusca sent his officials to ask for peace between the two countries. After the Blefuscans had arranged everything with the Lilliputian officials, they came to visit me. They had heard how I had prevented the king from destroying all their ships. After thanking me, they invited me to visit their country. However, when I asked the king of Lilliput if I could visit Blefusca, he agreed, but very coldly. I learned later that he and some of his lords considered I was wrong to have a conversation with enemies of Lilliput. Now I was beginning to understand how difficult and dangerous political life can be. A few days later, I had another chance to help the king. I was woken at midnight by the cries of hundreds of Lilliputians outside my house. Fire! Fire! They shouted. The queen's rooms in the palace are burning. Come quickly, man, mountain. So I pulled on my clothes and hurried to the palace. A large part of the building was in flames. People were climbing ladders up the walls and throwing water on the flames, but the fire was burning more strongly every minute. At least the queen and her ladies had escaped, but there seemed to be no way of saving this beautiful palace. Suddenly I had an idea. The evening before, I had drunk a lot of good wine, and very luckily, I hadn't made water since then. In 3 minutes, I managed to put out the wall fire, and the lovely old building was safe. I went home without waiting for the king's thanks, because I wasn't sure what he would say. Also, I had certainly saved the palace. I knew it was a crime punishable by death to make water anywhere near the palace. I heard later that the queen was so angry that she refused to enter any of the damaged rooms ever again and promised to take her revenge on me. Part 4. Gulliver escapes from Lilliput. I soon discovered that Flimnap, one of the king's highest officials, was my secret enemy. He had always disliked me, although he pretended to like me. But now he began to suspect his wife of visiting me privately, and he became jealous. Of course, his wife did visit me, but always with her daughters and other ladies who came for regular afternoon visits. When visitors arrived at my house, I used to bring the coaches and horses inside and put them carefully on my table. There was a high edge round the table, so that nobody would fall off. I sat in my chair with my face close to the table, and while I was talking to one group of visitors, the others used to drive round the table. I spent many hours like this in very enjoyable conversation. In the end, Flimnap realized that his wife wasn't in love with me and had not done anything wrong, but he was still angry with me. There were other lords who also disliked me, and together they managed to persuade the king that I was a danger to Lilliput. I knew they were discussing me in private, but I was seriously alarmed when I discovered what they had decided. Luckily, as well as Real I had another good friend among the king's officials. Late one night he visited me secretly in order to warn me. You know, he began, that you have had enemies here for some time. Many of the lords are jealous of your great success against Belfusco, and Flimnap still hates you. They accuse you of crimes against Lilliput, crimes punishable by death. But I cried, that's not right. I only want to help Lilliput. Listen, he said. I must tell you what I have heard, although my life is in danger if I do. They have accused you of making water in the king's palace, refusing to take all the enemy's ships, refusing to destroy all the big Indians, seeing the enemy's officials privately, and planning to visit Belfusco in order to help the enemy against Lilliput. This is unbelievable, I cried. I must say, continued my friend, that our king reminded his lords how much you had helped the country. But your enemies wanted to destroy you. You suggested setting fire to your house at night. Then you would die in the fire. What? I shouted angrily. Be quiet, nobody must hear us anyway. The king decided not to kill you, and that's when your friend Real started speaking. He agreed you would make mistakes, but said that a good king should always be generous, as our king is. And he suggested that a suitable punishment would be for you to lose your sight. You would still be strong enough to work for us, but you wouldn't be able to help the big Indians. I covered my eyes with my hands. I had wanted to help these people and their king. How could they decide to punish me as cruelly as this? Your enemies were most disappointed with Rezal's plan, my friend went on. They said you were a big Indian in your heart, and reminded the king how much you cost Lilliput in food and drink. Lord Rezal spoke again to suggest saving money by giving you a little less food every day. In this way you would become ill, and in a few months you would die. And so they all agreed. In 3 days, Lord Rezal will be sent to explain your punishment to you. He will inform you that the king has been very kind to you, and that you are likely to lose only your eyes. You will be tied down, and very sharp arrows will be shot into your eyes. The king's doctors will make sure that you can no longer see. This is terrible news, I said, but thank you for warning me, my dear friend. You alone must decide what to do, he replied, and now I must leave you, so that nobody suspects me if warning you. When I was alone, I thought about the situation for a long time. Perhaps I was wrong, but I could not see that the king was being kind and generous in ordering such an inhuman punishment. What should I do? I could ask for a trial, but I was not confident of the judge's honesty. I could attack the capital and kill all the Lilliputians, but when I remembered the king's past kindness to me, I didn't want to do that. At last, I decided to escape, and so before Lord Rezal came to tell me of my punishment, I went to the north of Lilliput, where our ships lay. I took my clothes off and put them into one of the largest warships. I also put a blanket into it. Then I stepped into the sea and swam to Blefusco by pulling the Lilliput warship behind me. I kept my clothes and blanket dry. When I arrived, the king of Blefusco sent 2 guides to show me the way of the capital. There I met the king, the queen, and the lords and ladies in their coaches. I explained that I had come to visit Blefusco, as I had been invited. However, I didn't say anything about the punishment waiting for me in Lilliput. They welcomed me warmly. That night, as there was no building big enough for me, I slept on the ground covered by my blanket. It wasn't as comfortable as my bed in Lilliput, but I didn't mind. I didn't spend long in Blefusco. Only 3 days after my arrival, I noticed a boat in the sea near the beach. It was a real boat, large enough for me. Perhaps it had been driven there by a storm. I swam out it and tied ropes to it. Then, with the help of 20 of Blefusco's ships and 3,000 sailors, I pulled it on the beach. It wasn't badly damaged, and it was exciting to be able to start planning my journey back to England and my home. During this time, the king of Lilliput had written to ask the king of Blefusco to send me back as a prisoner, so that I could receive my punishment. The king of Blefusco, however, replied that I was too strong to be taken prisoner, and that I would soon be returning to my country anyway. Secretly, he invited me to stay and help him in Blefusco, but I no longer believed in the promises of kings or their officials, so I politely refused. I was now important to start my voyage home, and the king ordered his workmen to repair the boat and prepare everything I needed. I had the meat of 100 cattle and 300 sheep to eat on the journey, and I also had some live animals to show to my friends in England. About 1 month later, I left Blefusco on September 24th, 1701. The king, the queen, and the lords and ladies all came down to the beach to have goodbye to me. After sailing all day, I reached a small island, where I slept at night. On the 3rd day, September 26th, I saw a sail, and I was delighted to discover that it was an England ship. on its way home to England. The captain picked me up and I told him my story. At first he thought I was mad, but when I took the live animals out of my pocket to show him, he believed me. We arrived home at last on April 13th, 1702, and I saw my dear wife and children again. At first, I was delighted to be at home again. I earned quite a lot of money by showing my Lilliputian animals to people, and in the end, I sold them for a high price. But as the days passed, I became restless and wanted to see more of the world, and so only 2 months later, I said goodbye to my family and sailed away again. The end of part 4. Thank you for listening me, and don't forget to like and subscribe my YouTube channel. Goodbye until tomorrow and next podcast.